Oh, hi, everybody. Hello, I'm Elena. I'm glad to see you are still joining. I hope you all are great today. And today we are gathering for Serpstat webinar with Garrett Sussman and Chahalis, dedicated to the future of SEO. Please say hello if everything looks great, the connection is good, and my sound is good too. Hello. Okay, and hello everyone, and I'm Olena Prohoda. Hi Boris. Today we are gathering for Serpstat webinar with Garrett and Zach, dedicated to the future of SEO. And now let's wait for attendees who want to learn more about that. And the following will be covered in today's session. Hi, Diana. Which platforms will exist? Which search engines exist beyond Google? Hello, you are still joining. Great. And I'm talking about which points we will cover today. Hello, Anna. How will we search? We've got 5 senses. The way we search has changed and will continue to change. Who curates information? To what extent will people be responsible for optimizing search versus code and artificial intelligence? So it's time to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Hope you all are great today. I'm Olena Prohoda, and I'm social media marketing and community specialist at Serpstat, the go-to platform to speed up search marketing goals achievement. Let me introduce our platform in a couple of words. It helps with search marketing tasks, cut down on repetitive manual work, and get more clients from search. The common use cases are competitors and backlink research, keywords analysis, organic and paid positions tracking, site audit, and so on. Manuals, tutorials, online support, and customer success come at no additional cost, as well as our Twitter chats and our webinars. And today, we are discussing the future of SEO, presented by Garrett Sussman and Zach Chahalis. And before we get started, we need to take care of a few things. Duration is 60 minutes, and stay tuned. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your YouTube control panel. We will bring them up at the Q&A session. Every registered participant will receive the webinar materials via email, and make sure you have registered through the link to the sign up page. In a few seconds, you'll see it in the chat box. One moment, please. It's here. With that, I am pleased to introduce our speakers for today, Garrett and Zach. It's time to meet them. Hi, Garrett. Hi, Zach.
Hey, Elena. Thank you so much for having us. I am hyped. I am hyped for this webinar with Zach and I to talk the future of SEO.
Great. And how are you, Zach?
I'm doing good. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. And let me say a couple of words about you. Garrett is a demand generation manager at iPullRank agency. He pulls rank with 10 plus years experience in digital marketing and making his clients proud by always being useful. He connects ideas, people, and solutions to the best outcomes. Also, he hosts great podcasts on the iPullRank YouTube channel. It's excellent place to stay updated and learn new things in marketing. And Zach is the head of SEO at iPullRank agency. He pulls rank with 20 years of experience in all things SEO, analytics, and paid search. He develops actionable SEO strategies and guides partners through the ever-changing and complex world of SEO. You guys are very welcome, and I'm happy to have you here. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to you. Here you are.
Thank you so much. How's everybody doing today? We all doing good? Okay, so why don't you put something in the chat? Let us know that you can hear us, because we're going to be a little interactive today. We're going to talk all about the future of SEO and what to expect in the coming years. So before we dive in, as Elena so graciously mentioned, my name is Garrett Sussman, Demand Generation Manager at iPullRank. Been doing marketing SEO for 14 years. I do all sorts of things: content marketing, demand generation, affiliate marketing, SEO. It's all the same, but all vastly different at the same time. I host the Rankable podcast, which is a weekly podcast where we have SEO experts talking all about the hottest topics and fundamentals, everything you need to know about the SEO world, and the SEO Weekly, which is a video show that I do, which updates with like all of Google updates and blog post updates and feature updates for various tools, podcasts, webinars, you name it, all about SEO, and that's on our YouTube channel, and you'll see a link later there. Over you, Mr. Zach.
Yeah, so Zach Chahalis, I am the director of SEO here at iPullRank. So what that means is I lead up a lot of the day-to-day client strategy development and managing our in-house teams here. So I come with well over a dozen years of experience in digital marketing, primarily focused in SEO, but I've also spent several years working within paid search along with analytics as well. And I work with clients anywhere from household names that you guys are going to be very familiar with down to mom and pop and small businesses, helping them grow their visibility within organic search. And I am also the co-founder of the ATL SEO organization, which is a group of Atlanta organized SEOs. So we collaborate, work together, share postings, try and collaborate when we can. So if you're in the Atlanta area, hit me up, and happy to add you into that group.
Awesome. And we're both for iPullRank agency. We offer services around enterprise level SEO, content marketing, audience research, content engineering. So we basically do a ton of technical SEO, a ton of content strategy, and building out that roadmap so you can solve all these problems and be future proof with your SEO. So iPullRank.com is where you can find us there, but we've got so much to cover. Hey, Svetlin, hey, Oshadi, we are going to dive into this world. So how did this whole webinar idea kind of start? Well, a few months ago, not a few months ago, back in February, I had my first daughter, right? And she was born, and I started thinking to myself, in 20 years, if she wants to go into SEO, is there even going to be an industry there? Like, is SEO going to be a thing in 20 years? And so I asked the SEO Twitter community, and I got all sorts of responses. Generally, the consensus was that as long as people are searching, which in essence they will be in some capacity, SEO will exist. It may not look like it does today. It might be on different platforms. We might search differently, but ultimately there will be SEO, right? But before we dive in any further, I want to give you a couple of big, fun caveats about this presentation. Number one, we couldn't cover everything. This is the future. It can go in all sorts of different directions. I am sure I missed things out, especially when it comes to some of my favorite science fiction SEO movies. Number two, we're not professional futurists. Zach has a crystal ball, but have you gotten any of your stock market picks right yet?
No, because if I could predict the future, I would be living in a mansion somewhere on a hillside. But yeah, that hasn't worked out so far.
Exactly. What are my Apple stocks? And then third, we're Americans and we love movies. I realize we have a great, awesome audience all over Eastern Europe, Russia, full Europe, and states all over the world. I guess we don't need to apologize for it, but we are American and we love our American culture. So let's dive in. First question for everyone: what's your favorite futuristic movie, And how does it depict search? Love to see in the chat if you all want to throw in. Do you watch like a bunch of movies that are set in the future and at some point someone tries to use some search? What is your all-time favorite search movie? Because I'm going to take you through a trip through a few of mine. Do you have any favorites in here? As you can see from the very first slide, we have a little bit of a Back to the Future reference, and that's where we'll start. So let's dive in. Back to the Future. So I'm going to go through all these, and I want to kind of point out the way that they highlight search in these movies. For instance, in Back to the Future 2, which was made in 1989, and these are mostly chronological order, but it's set in the year 2015, which we have passed, and some of these we actually hit. There's a scene where Marty McFly looks at a TV screen and he says, hey, put up channel 202, 404, 608, 900. Voice search. He then uses voice search again to ask for the fruit, and this fruit drops down from the ceiling. He also uses his virtual reality glasses. We got the Disney movies from LJ. We got the Matrix from Yulia. Aha. 1993, Demolition Man. Ridiculously bad movie with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. It's set in 2032, and in that year, everybody eats Taco Bell. I don't know why, it's Taco Bell, but they have kiosks everywhere, which that's how they get their information. They go to a random physical kiosk, which just shows that it's so hard to predict the future of search. They didn't even think about the idea of mobile phones. They went to kiosks. The Matrix, as Yulia mentioned, set in 2199. Now, this is a whole different type of search because it's all inside your head. It's the whole simulation sort of thing, right? You can feel, you can taste, you can do all these things, and you can just search. Like in the scene, Neo is like, I want guns, give me guns. And all these guns. That's how he searched. A little bit of voice search there. And then like learning things. If y'all remember, he's like, I want to learn Kung Fu, or they put a little module, computer program, and boom, he knew Kung Fu. So that's an interesting form of search. Minority Report, made in 2002. That was actually set in 2054. And the thing that stands out with this is Tom Cruise trying to predict future crimes using gesture search, where it's a combo of voice search and gesture search. He's like, I want to see this time, this date, and a bunch of videos come up. And then all of a sudden he's got those gloves and he's like moving things around. He's using his gestures to search for things. WALL-E, made in 2008, apparently set in 2805. So like 800 years from now is a little hard to predict, but it's basically our humans as a society are just in chairs consuming, where we just say what we want. We're watching media constantly. There's a ton of advertisements, which is very interesting, and one of the directions that I'm ultimately going in. But that's how they search, is more just voice search, and that's all they need. Ready Player One. Now we're getting to virtual reality. So 2018, but it's set in 2045. 23 years from now, maybe, but basically most of society is interacting in a virtual capacity. They have their VR, they have these suits that allow them to feel things, these haptic suits. So there's this ability to search where they're basically interacting with their environment. It's a combination, again, of voice search and gesture search. And now one that's a little further back, but I think in some ways is interesting, the most accurate interpretation of technology and search in a movie, which is the movie Her, which is actually supposed to be set in a near future. It doesn't have a specific time. It's ambiguous. There are clues that it's in 2025 because there's like some photos that look like they're from the 70s. But ultimately, the interesting thing about Her is it has still these graphical user interfaces where people are either using voice search or they're using like a stylus and typing. It has an augmented reality, as you see in a video game system, where people are interacting with the augmented reality there. It's different types of searches. And one of the biggest things is it's very implicit. It's all about a voice like assistant, right? Like that's the whole Scarlett Johansson character, is this person that can answer any of your sophisticated questions. So this feels like the most realistic direction of search. So what do we notice? What are the trends that we notice about these searches, and where are we at currently in 2022, which is there are different contexts where search is appropriate, different search tools to be able to search for different things, whether you're using your voice or gestures, different mediums, whether it's text or video or visuals or audio, and then ultimately different data sources, like where are you getting your information from? And that's what I want you to think about when you're thinking about the future of SEO is where do you currently search? What sort of answers are you looking for? And what does that look like? So really basic for all you SEOs in a Serpstat webinar, but I got to ask, what is the definition of search engine optimization? You know, from Oxford Languages, which is the source of Google, you know, definitions most of the time on SERPs. And then from Wikipedia, it's this process of maximizing the number of visitors to a particular website by ensuring that the site appears high on the list of results returned by a search engine. Right? It's basically using any sort of search engine. Wikipedia mentions the idea of including image search, video search, academic search, news search. It's kind of focused on the big G, right? Focuses on Google. And yet, when you look for something like best futuristic movies, all of these different platforms that we can search on have vastly different results. So if you look at this example here, you can see top left is Google, right below it is Bing. Both have, you know, the movie images of the movies, the top movies, and then start to see some results. DuckDuckGo is just a bunch of IMDb links. They don't have any sort of enhanced feature snippets. Look at Amazon, which is a more commercial search engine. You're seeing the best movies, which are awful. They have The Hunger Games as #1. And we'll just say that Amazon has ulterior motives when it comes to their search results because they obviously want you to buy what's most expensive. They want to put their products at the top. I'm not going to get too much into e-commerce, but we're thinking about YouTube. These are kind of aggregations of best, you know, futuristic movies. Reddit, asking a bunch of people in the community their opinions, although their results aren't the best. There's a lot of criticism on Reddit that their actual search engine doesn't usually provide the best results, despite the fact that a lot of people will actually go to Google, type in their search query, and then add Reddit at the end of it to find a lot of the best content that's on Reddit. Then we go to social. Twitter, not great in this context. TikTok, some interesting videos, but it's just another aggregate as well. LinkedIn, I don't know why anyone would search for best futuristic movies on LinkedIn, but to each their own. And Facebook. So my point is there are all these different platforms beyond Google, different types of search engines that are actually specific information seeking search engines and social media search engines, which have different type of content. So let's talk about Google. In order to understand where we're going, you got to think about where we've been. And if you go to this page, this our history, Google gives you a nice history in how it's developed over time, whether that's consumer facing features like voice search or mobile web search, more recently things like Google Lens or universal search showing images in your search engine results, or behind the scenes types of enhancements, whether it's using algorithm updates, you know, starting at PageRank and adding things like the knowledge graph and, you know, ultimately BERT and MUM for more sophisticated types of queries that the user might not know that things are necessarily different. And yet the results are dramatically different because Google actually understands what you're asking for better. So when we look at these, a couple I wanted to call out is things like the autocomplete, you know, being able to search in Google starting to predict based on machine learning what your query is going to be. Universal search, as I mentioned, voice search, then a bunch of these behind the scenes like Hummingbird for more conversational searches. Because back in the day when you were searching like 15, 20 years ago, it was just keywords. You know, if you wanted to find, you know, movie times, you literally had to put in movie times. You couldn't put in, you know, what times are movies playing at the theater near me. That like conversational contextual query wouldn't always provide great results. So we learned to just do the basic keyword. But as neural matching, where it connects the words and the concepts, and BERT and MUM advance the algorithms and the ability to connect these words to concepts and to connect these words to ideas, and knowing that the place of the word within the query changes the meaning of the search, we learned how to ask for more sophisticated questions. Now, I will also say that Google is not there yet in terms of being able to understand anything that we ask and provide good results, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So as I mentioned, how we search, you've got these static exact match keywords, moving on to contextual searches, adding to entities, which entities are things, right? Entities are concepts. They're mother, daughter, they're London, they're people, places, things. Google expands its knowledge graph. It understands attributes around these entities and can better understand where it's appropriate to surface information about them based on your query. And then multimedia searches. So that's kind of where we are now, which is adding more and more abilities to search by voice, search by visuals, search by eventually gestures. And then how we search. So that's how we do it. These text, voice, Google Lens, multi-search. Zach, I've been going a mile a minute. So I wanted to see if there was anything that you had to chime in on, especially when it comes to Google.
Not particularly. I mean, to your point, though, like Google has notably advanced and evolved over the last, not only just the last 20 years, but even just the last couple of years. They've gotten a lot more advanced at understanding those things that we are looking for. But I think to your point as well, there's also still some room to grow and get better, and it's still far from perfect.
Exactly. So, and you can just see the advancement from just 10 years ago, from 2012 to 2022, when we always talk about SEO of like the top 10 blue links, it used to be like maybe an ad at the top and then just organic links to other websites. Now we have all sorts of complicated search features that really almost push, you'll see it in the red box, push the organic results down to the bottom. We have top stories. We have the knowledge graph around this concept, this entity of water. We have questions that people also ask for to give you a sense of what else you might be asking. And that's kind of a direction that Google is going, is helping you to refine your search, helping you to better ask questions and find information that you might not have even known that you were looking for. Now, we start with Google because the plain reality is, and this was a study done by Jumpshot and SparkTuro back in 2019, of where people search, 94% of searches happen on Google properties, whether that's just main Google search, whether that's Google Images, whether that's YouTube. And if we're being honest, that's probably not going to change anytime soon. It is very, very hard to kind of impact and get into that sort of share of voice, that sort of mindset of people using things outside of Google. However, if you see in the bottom left corner, there's a little asterisk to this data, which is that the data is from browsers, right? The data is from what you search on an actual browser like Chrome, Safari, Firefox. It's not native to the app. So if you're going on Facebook or Amazon or YouTube or Twitter or any of these social media or TikTok, that is not included in this data, which makes me believe, and this was also 2019, 3 years ago, and pre-pandemic, before people were using their phones constantly to search, that while it's probable that Google still has the vast majority of searches, I would argue that social media and other platforms are starting to take a bite out of that. Zach, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I would agree. I mean, when you start looking at it, even back in 2019, like this isn't the complete picture. I mean, don't get me wrong, it doesn't diminish Google's share. It is still quite large. But yeah, I mean, it is not factoring in what's taking place in those particular apps. And now when you start seeing the demand for something like a TikTok with as many people that are spending time within that platform and searching within it, I mean, that's not going to be reflected as much within that browser data. So there are some things that are starting to combat Google a little bit, but they are still that 800-pound gorilla in the room.
And they probably will be for a while. I agree. I mean, they'll argue because they're in the US, we always have this debate about whether they're a monopoly and whether at any point any of our various governments will get involved and try to break them up. They'll say that 55% of people in the US who are looking for a product will actually search on Amazon first, or Walmart or eBay. Now, this is Google propaganda, but they make that claim. And then they also said that in their studies recently, came out a few months ago, that something like 40% of young people, when they're looking for a place to go to lunch, they don't go to Google Maps or search, they go to TikTok or Instagram. There was a article talking all about, is TikTok the new Google? Now, it is dubious claim at best, but it comes back to this concept of understanding your audience, understanding their search intent, and trying to be where they are for their searches. And it's not always Google. If you look at social media, I mean, Facebook is still the biggest social media. No matter what you hear about TikTok or Twitter or anything else, like, in the millions. This was of January 2022. So you have Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, WeChat, Weixin, and TikTok, right? So you still have millions and millions of people worldwide using these social media apps as their original source for data. Because you got to think, everybody has a hierarchy with how they search for things. If I want to find, a how-to, or if I want to look for advice, I might go to Reddit first. I might go to my Facebook group before I go to Google. If I want some basic informational knowledge, then yeah, I'll probably go to Google first. But everyone has their hierarchy of platforms that they're searching on. And search engine optimization goes beyond Google. It's how are you appearing on all of these platforms. Different types of search intent. So that's when we really want to look at, for our own businesses, not only the audience and where they search, but what they're searching for. So if they're putting a query and they want something educational, it's an informational search. If they're going specific to, like, I want to get Nike shoes, so I'm going to go specifically to Nike's website. Or if I want to hire iPullRank for their SEO services, I'll go to iPullRank's website. Those are branded search. Those are navigational searches. We have transactional, where you actually want to buy now. Obviously, a lot of people do go to Amazon first for any sort of purchase, for a lot of logistics reasons, that they actually deliver the best customer experience. And so that search engine is very important for e-commerce sites. Now, in the last month at Google Search On, Google is trying to add a significant amount of e-commerce features and trying to compete with Amazon. And they haven't been able to really successfully up to this point, despite having Google Shopping, but it'll be interesting to see the extent to which people will actually go to Google first for a lot of e-commerces in the near future. Zach, do you have any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because even just thinking about my own search habits, right? If I'm looking for something in particular, where I start my journey is going to entirely depend on what I'm doing. But then you find yourself kind of hopping around a little bit. I mean, even just in my own recent journey, I'm a watch guy. I was trying to find a watch strap, and I tried 5 or 6 different search engines, and none of them provided the result I was looking for in terms of a particular color or style of strap that I was looking for. So, you start trying to work your way down that kind of purchase funnel or informational funnel where, like, oh, I'm interested in this topic. Now I'm looking around it. I'm looking for certain brands. I'm looking for companies I've interacted with before, and none of them are filling in that box. So I might start looking at, well, let me go check on a Facebook and see, what people are talking about on there and see if that fulfills what I'm looking for. Or I might go look at a YouTube and learn more about that topic. And you might end up on a different search engine. So you're jumping around based on what those mediums are.
That's a great point. And there's a trust element there. Like, search engines are building or losing trust based on their results. If you don't trust their results to be what you're looking for, then you're going to go somewhere else, to Zach's point. The fourth part of this is discovery, which technically isn't a search because it's more of a passive happening to you type of search, but it still is kind of encroaching on our search engines because that's what TikTok is known for, is discovery within the realm of interests. And Google is moving in that direction too, as they broaden or refine searches for you. If you're scrolling up Google and you're not finding what you look for, Google on mobile, for instance, is showing you other related topics. So when you're thinking about search intent and you're trying to match the medium, the big question to ask about your audience is, what's the best medium to answer your search? Is it video? Is it images? Is it audio? Because we do have voice search. Is it text? What platform am I most comfortable using? We mentioned earlier about, Gen Z or younger folks, being into TikTok. Yes, there's more people, older people using it, but like if they're growing up on that and that's delivering them the best value, then you need to be on that platform if they're your audience. And then finally, what search tool do I prefer to use? Do I prefer, like, there are a lot of folks, in their 60s and 70s who have adopted voice search because it's really easy to use. Siri and the different home voice assistants are making voice search significantly easier for people who might not, be as comfortable with different technology, but they've given it a try. We're going to dive into that. So it's worth thinking about these 3 questions when choosing your medium and choosing your tool and your platform.
And also keep in mind too, it may be multiple things, right? You may have
Yes.
different aspects of how you function that depends on your section of business. You may need to look at different approaches.
And to that point, that going back to the science fiction, examples of search is some of the best ones are realizing they are based on context. If you're in your car and driving, you're not going to be looking down and texting or using videos. You're going to be using voice search. If you are at the store, you can't hop on a desktop. Like, you're going to be using your phone, and maybe you're, searching on a native app. So just to show kind of the matrix, and this is current, right? These are the current platforms, but TikTok has come out of nowhere over the last 6 to 10 years. And so at any given point, if in that given context, for that specific type of search intent, if someone produces better results, a more frictionless experience, and I hate to say it, has good marketing and adoption rates, more people are going to be using it, and then it's going to become a competitor in that space. So information textual will be like Google and Twitter and Facebook and Reddit. Transactional, you're always going to see Amazon in there. As we move down to visual, you're going to see a lot more of Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Pinterest. And then audio is really based on the organizations that have produced these voice assistants, the Google Home Assistant, Alexa, Cortana, and Siri. And then I added Spotify in there because, when you're actually trying to discover something audio, that's what Spotify is for. So with text, obviously, we are very comfortable using Google. It is the go-to when we're using it. Sure, Bing and DuckDuckGo and even Neeva exist, but Google is that go-to that the vast majority of people use. However, when we have these other tools, it starts to get interesting. For instance, Google 2018 released Google Lens, which is using your phone to search by pictures. So if you want to translate a sign, if you want to find a, something e-commerce, a product that you see in person that you want to purchase, then you can use that, or identify like a plant. There are a lot of practical applications to using the camera on your phone to do searches. Now, Google claims that 8 billion times a month people are using Google Lens. I am skeptical personally. However, when I asked about that in Twitter a few months ago, a lot of people are using it. Do you think to use it in the moment though? Like it's in the same way that our society has moved to capturing more footage by breaking out their phone when they're in public and all of a sudden just recording some event that's going on. Are you like kind of training yourself to take out your phone to use Google Lens? It might get adopted, but I don't necessarily feel like there's mainstream adoption yet. Zach, do you have any thoughts on Google Lens?
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with you on that. It's not typically the first thing I'm thinking about when I want to search for something, but maybe it comes to mind later if I'm, oh, I probably should have done that. I could maybe see how they're getting 8 billion a month, but I don't really hear folks talking about it that much. I don't see it that much in the industry or even in my personal circles of like people like, oh, I use this to find that. Like, all right, it could be happening. I'm just not seeing it.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see, and we'll get to a graveyard device that hasn't made it, to show an example of what happens when you don't get adoption. But the next generation of this is this idea of multi-search, a combination of different search tools. So this has been released over the past year and still actually being iterated on. A month ago at Search On, Google announced this idea of implementing local queries for multi-search. But the idea is you use your photo, and sometimes just searching the image in the photo isn't enough to get you the results that you want. You might want to add some more contextual text. So one example I saw recently from Glenn Gabe was if you saw a picture of a cocktail but wanted to know the recipe, you took a picture of the cocktail, added recipe in the text, in the multi-search, and started getting all of these options for recipes for what looked like that cocktail. Seems like a pretty cool use case, but again, the question is adoption. Are people don't know about this yet, at least the average non-SEO or digital marketer. And I'm sure there are a ton of digital marketers who don't know this exists. It sounds cool, but it also, the second part of this I will say is I am skeptical that the results will frequently be what you're looking for. I feel like Google might not be there yet, or maybe there's just not enough content out there to understand the image, add the context of the text, and then deliver results. That's what Mum is trying to do as an algorithm update. Zach, your thoughts?
I don't know. I struggle with the accuracy of that for right now. Maybe it does get better, but like as a good example, you mentioned cocktail. If I'm looking at a Kentucky Mule versus a Moscow Mule, can you tell the difference short of tasting it? But can something taking a picture of that be able to tell the difference of it, right? Like, you're looking at something that's basically served in the same glass and looks almost identical to one another. So you start running these types of things where you still need that context to have this search be fully functional. And I feel like that's going to hold it back from really truly being adopted in that case.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, is like there's still the whole idea of user error, and which is another theme of this, in the sense that our limitations of search, like we've been trained by search engines, and now in theory, as search engines get more effective in training us to be able to talk more conversationally in our searches because they can produce the answers. If we don't know the difference between the Moscow Mule and the Kentucky Mule, we don't know to ask that, and Google doesn't have the context to pick it up. So there's a potential mismatch there that wouldn't get you what you're looking for. The other thing is voice search, as I mentioned, which this is really interesting because there are the 4 different, voice search assistants, and they all use different sources of information. So Google and Siri both use Google for any sort of like textual responses. Alexa and Cortana uses Bing. Siri, Alexa, and Cortana for any sort of local related search, like finding a restaurant near me, will actually use Yelp results still, whereas Google will use Google results. So you're getting a different experience depending on the voice search, which isn't always the best experience, and it's not uniform, which leads to this issue of being at different platforms. If you have a bunch of your audience that's voice search users, and if you're able to know what their actual voice assistant is, that'll inform where it's more important for you to be for a search engine. Now, most people will be Google. Alexa, Alexa can actually be set up to use Google, but by default it uses Bing. So it'll always be interesting because they're competitors, Google and Amazon. The other part of this is just that there is this adoption of voice search more and more. So you can see like it went down a little from 2020 to 2021. And a lot of that is explained by the pandemic, when, we're all at home and used to interacting with our devices, more and more likely to use voice search. But in general, more and more people are actively and even daily, monthly, and even daily users of voice search. It is a tool that's being used that cannot be ignored, even though we always joke in the SEO community, like, how do you optimize for voice search? And, ultimately, we'll get into a little bit when we talk structured data, but it's just providing information in a structured way that the voice searches can understand. So interestingly enough, just in terms of which voice users are using which device, Amazon Alexa is winning as of 2021. It's getting closer between Google, Amazon, and some of the other, but right now, like, this is interesting because in terms of Alexa using Bing, if the vast majority are using Bing, you can't ignore it. You can't ignore Bing as a search engine. And then finally, devices in the graveyard. We all remember Google Glass, right? So Google Glass was this idea for augmented reality, the next level of search, which starts to get us closer to this idea of some of the science fiction movies, wearing our glasses to be able to add a layer of visuals on top of the reality that we're working with. And then, we see Ready Player One interacting with our virtual realities. Whether or not we get there in the near future is debatable, but there are people who invest completely in a virtual life. In this example, a Second Life, which is where you can create a virtual avatar, and people have gotten married off of this website and like sell e-commerce digital items, with NFTs and all of that. We are going in that direction. The problem is, search on virtual devices isn't ideal. If you've ever used an Oculus or PlayStation, like trying to actually navigate a website at this point is awful design. Like it's pointing and clicking. There's not a lot of voice search there. And so until that experience is improved, I can't imagine voice search being a good experience in VR. And then in terms of some of the actual real life future uses of the gestures like we see in the Minority Report, Google actually has this project that they're adding. This was like from 6 years ago. Now we haven't seen the mainstream, but the ability to manipulate digital devices using our gestures in real space. Is this going to be adopted? I mean, this was 6 years ago and it's not really close. When things go to mainstream, even if they're really cool concepts, they're not always adopted and then they just kind of disappear. So next 15, 20 years, maybe, but I would predict no. And of course, taste-o-vision and smell-o-vision. So when it comes to being able to search via your nose or your mouth, well, Willy Wonka predicted the ability to taste the snozberries. No, I can't imagine smell-o-vision, taste-o-vision ever being a thing. The closest that we'll ever get to it, which is really scary, is that Matrix concept where you're actually having a kind of, cerebral mental experience where you can experience those simulations. Zach, do you think we'll ever have smell-o-vision or taste-o-vision?
Ooh, not in a really functional way, and that the thought of it just terrifies me.
that there's a lot of bad searches that could happen.
Oh, yeah.
So let's get through, because I do want to save time for questions. I want to get through to when the future of SEO will be now, and probably not anytime soon. So like all those futuristic sci-fi things, are we going in the right direction? Are we seeing better search results? Yeah. But are we going to start be living in a virtual reality, or are we going to start, doing like a lot of gesture searches or even augmented reality Google Glasses? I mean, we saw from Google Glass, I don't think it'll come anytime soon. There's always can be a business that produces a really great experience connected to the source data that ultimately people adopt, but I think it's unlikely. So Zach actually has a few different predictions specifically to Google, though, that we need to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that they will continue getting better at understanding and evaluating content. We've seen it with a lot of the recent updates and just in general over the last couple of years. Is it perfect? No, it's still definitely not perfect. But we are continually getting better in terms of the quality of results and sites that we're seeing showing up within particular queries. So I think Google will continue getting better there. I do also think Google will get better with JavaScript and client-side rendering. As much as, it's talked about like, they've gotten a lot better with it, and, we're perfect with it now is sometimes what I hear. No, that's not the case. We still see a lot of issues with client-side rendering. We still see a lot of issues with JavaScript-based frameworks and platforms that are not getting rendered server-side. I think that it has gotten better. Is it good? Debatable. But I think it will get better over the next couple of years. I think Google and other browser render type platforms will start getting a lot better understanding it. I do think visual content optimization will become increasingly important. We do see a lot of folks, and I think TikTok's a good use case of this, as we see more people kind of taking part in the discover search, and people are getting shorter attention spans. I think what's the average attention span right now? 5 seconds before we probably already turned you guys off.
Sorry, I zoned out.
Yeah, thank you. But when you're looking at stuff like that, like typically that visual aspect is what draws people in and will keep their attention longer. So I think that's going to become increasingly important, similar to how voice search really was the focus many years ago. And there was a point where images and videos certainly were the focus. I think it's going to come back to that. I think we'll start to see more meta tags to support that aspect too. Like we saw the snippet stuff, getting played into it a couple of years ago. I think we'll expand on that, especially as we work more of these interactive or multimedia aspects into our sites and into our technologies. And I do think that we'll also be seeing an expansion of the structured data schema libraries to support this as well. Those are constantly changing, constantly evolving. Google's always adding new things like pros and cons schema that just, was accepted a couple of weeks ago. So there's always areas of opportunity for that to keep growing. And I think that will grow with any new changes or new features that get added in.
I'm with Zach on almost all of these. I think that this should inform your SEO strategy going forward, thinking about these. And we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do now to start to prepare well, these are already upon us, a lot of them. So, but to prepare to continue to improve your rankings. And we're getting a lot of great questions in the chat. So real quick, what are the problems with predicting the future of SEO? One is public versus private. As long as a public company is ultimately, or a private company is producing the data and the search interface and the search engine, they have their ulterior motives, whether it's advertising and making money that way or keeping you on their site. And I feel like it's unlikely that governments would ever become good at creating search engines. And even if they did, they'd have their own agenda. So that's a hard thing to predict of which direction. Reality versus virtual reality versus device. How much time are we spending, time in real life and searching based in reality? How much time are we actually going into that virtual reality? Like, it's going to happen at some point. The question is whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, where people are investing the majority of their time in this virtual space and then searching there. And then device, just actually searching on your device, being tied to like a desktop in your home. Best platform solutions in context. What are these platforms? That's always going to be changing. If Apple is the best voice search, we're going to be using Apple and whatever their data source is. If your phone is the best solution and you're actually searching on Google on your phone, or you're searching on a native app like TikTok, based on where you are looking for a place near you based on your phone device, that's going to be what you use. Data source integration. There's never going to be one kind of single source, in my opinion, of data. You're always going to have these different private companies having to work with each other. So that's the issue with Google right now, where if the majority of people, Google never really got social right. If the majority of people are uploading their video and picture content to TikTok, that's something that Google has to deal with, because people are going to be looking for that content on that other platform. So we're not going to have a singular search engine ever. And who do you trust? What do you trust? Is it going to be the people that are in your circles and where they're posting? Or is it going to be the experts? Or is it a combo of both? And where can you find their content? That makes it really difficult to say it's one specific platform or it's multiple specific platforms, or how you're using search. So what should we do in the meantime? I'll run through these quick tips. The fundamentals and some prompt engineering. So the fundamentals: optimize with structured data. I know this is something that Zach is really keen on, in terms of always making sure that you're providing all of these data attributes that you can, these keyframes, for your information on your site. If you run an e-commerce store and you have a great chair that you think people are going to buy, but there's no picture or mention of it on your website and people don't know how to find it, and there's nothing specifically mentioning that product, they're not going to find it. The key here and the theme is giving Google the information, or whatever search engine, the information to find your site, your product. Omnichannel and integrated marketing. This is the theme of all the different platforms, is making sure that you know where your audience is, knowing what type of content they're looking for, and having the message connect between the different channels for the best user experience. So your key users can find you whatever platform they're on in the way that they want for what they're looking for. Diversify your content media. This is what kind of Zach was referencing with things are getting more visual. You have to kind of jump into the game and use, unless you are strictly academic, if you are in any sort of B2B or e-commerce or even a lot of educational stuff, it is going to be imperative that you have visual content, that you have video content that people are looking for and can satisfy their search intent. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And then natural language generation, AI content. This is a little controversial right now with the helpful content update. But one thing I do want to say about AI content is even if Google is not perfect at delivering great results, and even if AI content isn't perfect at generation output, like the content that you get out of it, it shouldn't be a reason to negate it, to pour cold water on it no matter what. There's context for using this type of content, and maybe it'll help you generate at scale where you can still modify it to the level of quality content, but you shouldn't just say absolutely no under no circumstance, and that's not what Google's saying. Zach, do you want to speak to that?
No, I would 100% agree with that. There's definitely a place and space for that type of language generated content to come into play. From that perspective, is Google trying to get rid of all of that in terms of like something with the helpful content update? No, but there's certainly instances of bad generated content that is being targeted by this. So there's situations where it can be used to provide a benefit, provide that value. And, as long as it's giving that information to the user, it can still have a place in search today.
Exactly. And we actually, if you ever check out the Rankable podcast, I had Rachel Tapman. We talked about the problem with raw AI content output and why you should never use raw output, because basically a lot of AI content programs are just producing the next most likely word, which 9 times out of 10 isn't going to be the quality that you need to rank in Google.
Yeah. If you ever want to just have some fun, try just doing autocomplete on your iPhone or Google keyboard and just see what your paragraph looks like at the end of it. That basically, that's the need to review this stuff and make sure it actually makes sense for someone.
And to that point, that's where we're at now. However, I feel strongly that in the future, technology will improve and we will get to a point where, because it is machine learning as well, it's based on different libraries of knowledge. So as we continue to get better predicting the next word, but more, in other words, also understanding concepts and entities in the same way that search engines do and producing better content, we need to understand how to ask for AI content, which leads to this whole idea of prompt engineering, which is probably the future of content engineering. You'll always want expert POVs, but for anything that's basic information that doesn't require like any sort of unique viewpoint, AI content will be able to produce that both text and visually. And a lot of that is being able to say, what's the task that I want? Here are the examples. Here's the output that I'm hoping to see, and then having. And this is what we're going to end up learning in school in terms of prompt engineering. And you can even see this from DALL-E, which is really hot right now, which is text to image generation, which we're already seeing with videos too. It's how you can say exactly what you want, but the output depends on the input. You're only going to get out of it what you put in. Any thoughts on the future of AI content, Zach?
I do think it'll get better. It'll get more efficient. It's hard not to, right? I mean, look where we've come over the last 10 to 15 years. It's only going to get better from here. It's just how do you most efficiently use it for what you're trying to accomplish?
Exactly. So to summarize, what should you do in the future of SEO? We let y'all like 5 minutes because I'm not known for being short. I am not good at brevity. That said, I hope you enjoyed. Understand your audience and intent. Really understand who you're trying to target with your content and what they're looking for and what those results of the search intent look like so you can produce similar. SEO is mostly Google, but also more than Google. That's not going to change at any time soon, that Google is ultimately the biggest search engine, but there are all these other platforms out there that you need to be aware of. And finally, get the fundamentals right and feed the machine. Provide all of the information that search engines want to be surfaced. It's not just about keywords anymore. It's developing concepts and visuals and providing quality experiences and quality content across the board. Any other takeaway, final thought that you have, Zach?
No, I'm completely in agreement, but we have some great questions.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, the movies are magical, but they're fictional. So next time you watch a movie that tries to predict search, they don't know any better than we do. Thank you so much, y'all. This was a lot of fun, Elena. Thank you for having us. If you want to come back, I know we're almost at time, but if you want to find any of us, here's how you can get in touch.
Oh, great. Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Deck. Your presentation is perfect, full of actionable tips and super references. So we'll go ahead and take some time for questions now. If you don't mind, we will take another 10 minutes for that. Great. So let's start with the questions from the Google form. So the first question is Google and really all big tech companies are past their do no evil phase and no longer value privacy or even democracy of thought. Do you see any viable efforts within the search world for a platform that truly honors these values, and can they make enough money to survive?
No. No. Everyone has a motive of some way, shape, and form, right? I mean, if you think about anyone that's playing within the search engine space today, they're all kind of going after the same thing. Either they have some type of a sponsorship, or they have some other product or motivation at play, or it's advertising and they're trying to get the dollars out off of that. So as long as that's a consideration, I don't see it coming into play to protect the customer as much. There are, I think, situations where they're trying, but I don't think it's doing it.
Yeah, agree with Zach. I mean, ultimately, they are always going to share that they're doing their best efforts, forward facing, to your point about their motto about do not be evil. But I'm not going to get into any like conspiracy theories because I don't think anything like really shady is happening, but you can't always trust technology. And at least in the US, I know it's different in Europe, but in the US, we don't have the appropriate watchdogs in the first place to have any sort of meaningful impact. I think the best bet is probably the European Union.
Okay, got it. Thanks. So another one. What do you think of forum links for SEO? What would you say in the context of the future for that?
There's always a place for linking. I think forum links started getting devalued many years ago, and I think there's still some places where they can be valuable to a point, but I think they've gotten so spammy that for the most part, they're just not driving the value. And if anything, they may have more of a negative impact than a positive at that point. So normally I lean towards the perspective of natural linking, helpful content, creating things that people want to link to. Not to say there's not a place for forum linking. I just don't see it being as effective as it was, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, to Zach's point, think about it this way. Like, could someone exploit that sort of tactic? If there's a way to exploit it, we saw it with blog comments back in the day where like, oh, if I can just add my link to every single, blog comment and get the link equity from that, will that improve my rankings? Well, if anybody can do it, that totally defeats the purpose of having links as a ranking factor. So I kind of see forum links in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And let's move on. So what would you say about the future of SEO regarding specifics of SEO in B2B environment?
So I'll speak as someone that has spent a lot of his career working in the B2B environment. I think there's still a great area of opportunity for this. I think it is coupled with other marketing efforts at the same time, right? So, not everyone is going to be searching for a particular B2B topic within search, but more than likely they're going to start seeing it and they're going to operate based on maybe names they're familiar with or thoughts and feedback from other people or in marketing campaigns that are going on. And I think that will be a big driver of that, but there's still that area of opportunity for B2B from an SEO standpoint, because you want to still be present. You want to be there. You want to beat out your competitors for the folks that are maybe not looking from a biased perspective around a certain brand. There are still folks that are searching organically for these types of things. I spent many years working in-house and agency side with B2B brands, and it's very possible to generate a ton of great content and great traffic to a B2B site that will lead into leads and revenue.
And to Zach's point, I think you always have to be aware of the funnel as well. Like, people are always going to have questions at the very top level of like just not being even problem aware to going all the way down to your brand. And one thing we've seen with Google is they are trying to help you refine your SERPs. So in some ways, there might actually be more opportunities for B2B as you go for very specific questions that haven't been answered in different types of content. Like, if you know your customers and you know every single different pain point, for a B2B of like what software or what service they need to use or what business they want to work with, being able to be that answer I don't think anything's changed. If anything, it'll be more lucrative.
And there's certain topics within those B2B clusters as well, where like you can hit on an informational topic, you can hit on news topics or trends or things that are going on there, and raise your overall profile as a brand too, that then will tie into people like, oh, I want to work with those folks. They know what they're doing.
Great. Thank you. And one more question from the Google form. Is video dominating the clicks on search results? Also, what difference between B2C versus B2B? B2B segments like industry have much less videos available to be shown on SERPs.
So video content is topical to me. There are certain things that make sense to be in video, both B2B and B2C. That, it may make sense in one industry versus another. If I'm looking for something like, hey, how do I implement this within a platform? Or I want to see a review of this product. That may lead more towards video content in both realms. If I have a product that's a SaaS-based solution, and I want to be able to have that video content that supports, hey, how do you actually do this? How do I make that decision based on this data? How do I get that implemented in? But if I'm, I'm a gamer. So if I'm looking at like, oh, what video game do I want to go buy? I'm looking at video content to see like, is this something I actually want to spend money on? Does this look fun? Does this look like something that I'm going to enjoy? So I think there's plenty of room for video content on both sides of things. I see it becoming increasingly popular with both, especially as attention spans continue to go down.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about is going back to the webinar is this whole idea of search intent. Like, the best way to understand whether you should be doing video or not is looking at your keywords or looking at what your customers are searching, and is video showing up because Google's giving you clues whether or not your users want to see video. So like, you can always experiment one way or the way. That I think in B2B, yes, you do need to get creative sometimes if it doesn't seem like video is natural. And obviously the most attention grabbing, creative folks will show up. But go back to the SERPs. If you're seeing video results, then video is an opportunity.
And also make sure that you're implementing it right as well. I mean, Google's still a blind user in the sense when it comes to multimedia content such as videos and images. So if you're going to add that in, yeah, you want it to be great for your users, but make sure that search engines can see it and understand it as well. And that's where schema, markup, alt text, all that information that you can add in comes into play.
Okay, thank you for your points of view. And let's turn to the questions in the chat. From so much optimized content on the web, will there be a point that Google will have difficulties choosing the best results? Like the difference between websites' content will be too small?
I don't think that the difference between website content will ever be too small. There are too many different platforms and approaches to coding and building something that, I'm sure there's instances where, yeah, something might be very close, or if you're all running the same Shopify template, that you might start to see some scenarios like that where it comes down to the content, what's on site. But I don't think we're ever going to get to that realm. At the same time, Google already has issues choosing the best result. And you can kind of see that all the time. It's dependent on what you deem is the best result for you. And you're trying to get Google to predict that for you. You still see instances where review content sites that are ranking #1 for something are absolute trash, and Google's still trying to get better at sorting that out. Is that, the best result? They say it is, but it's not to me.
Yep, I'm with Zach, and it's interesting how they're trying to do it too, because like a few months ago they started to talk about this idea of consensus, right? So because there's only so many ways to give the definition of something. You see it every time there's an update where definition sites go up and down, or music lyric sites go up and down, because there's only one lyric. Ultimately, there's probably other site-wide factors that would decide who wins that SERP in terms of that feature snippet. That's a consensus, but what those factors are will always be behind the black box to some extent, and it'll probably fluctuate.
Oh, great. I agree with you. And let's turn to the question from Diana. Can AI-powered content creation tools fully replace human writers in the future?
How far in the future? Not in the near future, Zach.
I would agree. I mean, there's a lot of editing that needs to take place today in order to properly get there. Maybe eventually, yeah. I think to Garrett's question, yeah, if we're talking like 20, 30 years from now, possibly, maybe sooner. But right now, I don't see it anytime in the near future.
Okay, we'll see. So the question from Jordan Rose. Hello, boys. How will Core Web Vitals evolve in the future? How important will these factors be in the future for ranking the site?
So, and this is maybe like a hot take type thing. I think that the value of page speed in Core Web Vitals is getting overblown as an actual ranking factor today. But there's a ton of value in optimizing your site speed and experience, not just for SEO rankings, but for your users as well. Every additional second of site load time impacts your bounce rate like this, impacts your conversion rate like that. So I think it will continue to evolve where Google is looking for more of these types of metrics and measurements that we can add into Core Web Vitals to provide that good experience. And I think it's also going to depend a bit on, what types of changes or new features or new mediums come into play over points in time. I could definitely see things related to video popping into that. And right now, video impacts site load time in terms of how it's rendered into the page. So I think there will be a lot of opportunities there. I don't see it being the biggest ranking factor, but I could certainly see it becoming a higher quality or higher valued ranking factor over time. I just personally right now feel like it's a little bit overblown in terms of how much people think it impacts the rankings. It more impacts the user experience and your actual site-wide metrics.
Yeah, I'm with Zach on that. I mean, remember, Google never said it was a major factor. If anything, it was like a tiebreaker between two sites. And the other big thing to remember is, even though they've been banging this drum of, speeding up your website for years now, 35%, I believe, still don't actually hit the benchmarks of websites across the entire internet, hit the benchmarks of Google's expectations for page speed. And I wouldn't anticipate Google penalizing major authoritative sites that haven't gotten their act together when it comes to page speed. So even if we all know it's important, I think also one other point of that is Google's ulterior motives, again, are they want your site to be as clean and fast and easy to understand as possible, because that saves them money in crawling and indexing and and serving. And so all of that is, I'm with Zach. I don't think it's worth spending too much time unless your site takes hours to load and people are going elsewhere to others.
And also keep an eye on what your competitors are doing too, right? I mean, is your site better than the competition in that realm?
Yeah.
Some things are going to be more intensive to have on a site. I work with home builders for a long period of time. If you're trying to render a high quality image of a home and all your other competitors are doing the same thing, can you do better than them?
Agree. And one more question for today. Hey, what should I do to prepare my site for future Google algorithm updates?
Well, there's a couple things. One, definitely feel free to talk to us. We're, that's what we specialize in, is, high quality SEO strategies that won't get you hit by a penalty, but also will help you grow your performance. But in terms of it's really following those kind of almost common sense guidelines when it comes to SEO, right? If you're going to try and spam backlinks, more than likely you might get hit by a penalty. If you're going to just upload junk spun AI generated content without any oversight to it, you might get hit by an algorithm. These things are going to come. It's kind of understanding, where those things that Google's impacting are going to come into play. And there's a function of skirting the line a little bit. Like, you do want to make sure you're doing the best quality work and things that you can. But in some cases, there's a line and you jump over it and you're going to get bit by it. So it's following some of those best practice guidelines, but still trying to figure out ways that you can be better than your competition without jumping too far over those lines.
Yeah, I agree with Zach. And it's one of those kind of the mantras of SEO in a lot of ways. Maybe this is underselling, but it's simple, but not easy, right? Like, it's one of those things of do the fundamentals. You think about your users, create good content, think about search intent and provide them what they're looking for. Make your site easy to understand. Don't overcomplicate it with plugins and flashy and this, that, and the other thing. Simple, but it's not easy.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers and ideas. I see a question regarding the recording. The recording of this webinar will be published in a few days on our YouTube channel. Garrett, Zach, any points you want to add or highlight before wrapping up?
No, this has been so much fun. Appreciate the engaged audience, awesome audience. As Zach mentioned, if you want to find us on iPullRank.com, you can see both of our Twitter handles on here. If you have any questions after this, we both hang out on Twitter, so feel free to shoot us questions. Always happy to help. And yeah, check out our YouTube channel as well. Go watch the Serpstat recording first, then you come over to the iPullRank channel and watch some SEO weeklies.
Yeah,
okay,
appreciate y'all having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And friends, what I would like to add, please stay tuned for our future webinars and join our Serpstat chats on Twitter. There you can get answers to your questions on a featured topic from SEO experts. There is also a place where you can contribute your expertise. And we host the Serpstat chats regularly on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on our Twitter. Join our Google Calendar to make sure you won't miss our future Twitter chats and webinars. In a few moments, the link will appear in the chat box. One moment, please. It's here. So this Thursday, we will have a chat with Marco Giordana, and the topic is blogging and SEO, how to optimize your blog posts. And I would be happy if you join Marco and me there as well. Garrett and Zach, thank you so much for sharing with us your Tuesday, for sharing your insights and points of view. Guys, thank you for watching, asking questions, and being here with us. This was really fun. Have a great rest of the day, Garrett, Zach, and you all guys. And let's meet again at our future online events. See you. Goodbye.